So one thing we get questions about is how you can do a more compact or like a skinny pitch with your X-Mid tent to fit it into a really small campsite. So for that, there are actually several ways of doing it. So we're going to take a closer look at those options. If you're doing a more compact pitch, essentially what you're going to do is shrinking this vestibule, one or both of them. And so what you need to do is get rid of this part of the tent. So to do that, we are going to need to unstake this corner. But this corner is currently doing two things. Number one, it is anchoring the peaks here. That is supporting the peak from collapsing away to that side. And the second thing that it's doing is it's holding out the corner of the inner. We have that cord inside where the corner of the inner is clipped out to here. So if we just unstake this, the tent's gonna kind of half fall over and the inner is gonna lose its tension. So what we're gonna need to do is add some other way of securing those 2 points. For the fly, that is always going to be deploying the peak guy line to anchor it from this side instead of the corner. So with the peak guy line, you can stake this out kind of any normal position, but what you might prefer is that you can use the same stake as the corner's at. So you can unstake this corner if you also put the peak guy line there and then tighten it up so that it's not going to fall away. Like so. So now your tent is anchored from this side without the corner in place. And then the second thing that we need to anchor here is the inner tent. So the inner tent, if your stake's close enough, you can also put it to that same stake and just have the one stake. You could add a new stake here for this. You could also stake it, you could tie a knot here and stake it just closer, another stake at the corner of the floor. Or what I like to do is, we've got this extra stake point here on the corner, on the end wall of the fly. We're gonna tend to wanna use this to keep more of the fly tight. So if we're adding a stake here anyways, then we can also attach the corner of the floor to this stake. So you could just tie a knot or any kind of method for anchoring the corner of the floor here. So now you've done kind of your two initial steps that you're always going to do. You're going to have anchored the peak from this side and you're going to have secured the floor in some alternate way so that you're not relying on this corner of the fly being pitched out. So now the real question and all the different variations on these methods are just what to do with this extra fabric. And for this, there's really three main methods. What you can do is you can roll it back, you can collapse it in, or you can pull it out into a floating hexagon. So we'll look at each of those methods. The first method is to essentially just take the corner and just bring it in and stake it down along the side of the tent. So here, what you can do is you could just take a new stake, or you can even just put it to the same stake as you've already done for this end guy line. The second method for how you can do a more compact pitch, instead of collapsing the vestibule, is to roll up the fly on this side in essentially what we call zipperless door mode or desert mode. So for this, you're going to not have the corner connected to anything, and you're not even going to have this end wall connected to anything. Both sides are going to be loose. Make sure the inner of your tent is staked out. Just stake that somewhere that works handy. And then for the inner, what we're going to do here is we're just going to roll it up like so, and then you can tie it back here. What I like to do is use the tail of the peak guy line. I just run that through the vent, and then you can use that tail. You can just tie this back. So you've got some pros and cons to this method. With this method, it's great in good weather. You've got no loose fabric. You've got great views outside the tent. You are exposing part of the inner tent though, so if it's rainy or something like that, this is not going to be the method that you want to use. For that, you might prefer the third method. The third way that you can do is to stake it out at the door. So for that, you're going to need a stake. And the thing here is, when you pull out this door stake, it forms essentially a new shape for the fly. The unique thing here is that the whole fly can pull tight, except for this little triangle here. But what it's going to naturally do is lift off the ground by about a foot or more. So if the reason you need a compact pitch is that there's a slope or a bush or a log or something like that, you can stake it out like this, and this part of the fly will float over top of that while still giving you full protection from the rain. So this would be in like drizzly wet conditions, this is probably your best option. The fly isn't anywhere near the inner, there's no risk of them getting stuck together. All you're gonna need to do here is add a longer cord than I've got right now to the door stake, and then you could stake it out somewhere around here, and that whole fly is gonna be tight. One other thing to consider is that you might not actually need to use all of those compact pitch methods if your problem is just some type of obstacle under this wall. If you just have a rock here, you can just leave the door open. And if you have more of an obstacle, something longer, something like that, what you can do is open both sides of the door. So of course you can roll back the main part of the door, and then you can take the small side of the door. It doesn't have to be here. You can just throw it around the corner like this, it'll stay there. Or you can secure it. If it's got a bit of wind, you can just tie this cord to the stake point here.